Our culture is ripe with stories of loss and failure and victory. One of the great stories of the past that I would encourage you to read if you have not read it or to reread it is Victor Hugo's novel, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. The Hunchback of Notre Dame, by the name of Quasimodo. The people saw him as only a hunched-over monster, and yet within him lived and breathed a human being of great decency and humanity. The woman that we are told about in our story today from the Gospel is similar in the sense that she comes to the synagogue beaten and broken down by the world in some way. We can speculate about what ailment she suffered from, but is truly that important to us. For each of us and our family members suffer from time to time. We hear that in our prayers on Sunday morning. We hear it in our prayers in the evening. We hear it when we talk to our friends and family. We could go around right now and speak to you individually, and you could each share a story of tragedy, a story of terrible burdens that you carry with you, or people that you know that carry burdens. We sometimes don't know how to share them, except to perhaps come as we have today and other times, hoping that we might be heard. In our story today, we engage with the crippling spirit of a woman in bondage to a physical ailment of some kind. And we are confronted with the legalistic spirit of a ruler of the synagogue, a ruler of the community who doesn't want to be bothered on this special day with someone with a heavy burden. And then, the joyful spirit of a congregation, not unlike what I felt just moments ago as you gathered around me in prayer. As we gather around each of us in prayer, recognizing that the burden and the heaviness of things weigh each of us down. And we want to do, we need to do whatever we can to help others. Because again, we understand. Not exactly what's going on, but we understand the heaviness of that moment. Jesus has been trying to wake us up for century upon century. Jesus has been speaking to you as an individual for a long, long time. You know it. I know it. You may not know exactly when it started, but you just might. On this story and in this story that we hear today, Jesus speaks to the woman in a civilized society. However, women were not spoken to by Jesus because he was a man. This was one of the rules that Jesus broke at this moment in time. Jesus jettisoned, he threw out the male restraints on women's freedom, women's rights. They were astonished that he would dare break this cultural rule, and yet he did, because he saw how much it wore her down, how much of a strain it was on her. Not only that, he called her to the center of the synagogue, a place that was most often restricted, again, only to men and for men, challenging the notion of a male monopoly on the access to the knowledge and the blessing of God and of the Spirit. Not only this, he also touched her, revoking a holiness code which protected men from women's uncleanliness and her sinful seductiveness. And not only that, he dared call her a daughter of Abraham. Revolutionary, because in this day and age again, it was believed that women were saved only through their men. And to call her a daughter of Abraham was to make her a full-fledged member of the nation of Israel, irregardless of whether or not she had a man or not. She was recognized by Jesus himself as a daughter of Abraham. And it was on the Sabbath day, the holy day. Jesus again demonstrating that there were no restraints, there are no restraints, in demonstrating compassion and care for people. People are more important than ceremony. Last and not least, challenging the ancient belief that illness was a direct result of punishment for something that the woman had done at some point in time. That illness and sickness is not something that God wills upon us, but is present in our world, present in our life, because there is indeed evil that lives in the world around us. This story challenges us to re-examine ourselves and how we look upon each other. How do we do this? And for that matter, are we patient? How many times have I heard that already? Okay, and I brought it up myself. Truth and love. But one of the toughest things to do is manage our time, isn't it? We plan, we monitor our progress, we make adjustments, we anticipate a fast fix to things. I know I'm not talking about me right now, I'm talking about anything that we do, isn't it? We plan, we negotiate, we prepare, and we expect a fast change, and it doesn't happen. And we get frustrated. Can you imagine this woman, 18 years? 18 years, and she still comes back to a community that in large part ignores her because she's a woman. And yet she still finds herself coming back because she knows that her hope and her life and her spirit rests with God. And this is where the people go to worship God. And so she comes, hoping, praying, and she finds Jesus. People will come. People have come to us. And they will continue to come to us here at the Solon United Methodist Church. Here in the church, they will come because they sense our desire as they desire for some semblance of hope, faith, and trust in the kingdom of God. That's not that these hopes that we have are perfect in their vision. We know that the church is not perfect, don't we? Eugene Peterson, writer and preacher and teacher, once said in an interview, "There is nobody who doesn't have problems with the church." There's nobody. Because there's sin in the church. There's no other place to be a Christian, though, except the church. There's sin in the local bank. There's sin in the grocery store. I really don't understand this naive criticism of the institution of the church. I just don't get it, he says. Of course there's sin, because there's people. He said also that Frederick Van Hugel refers to the church like bark on a tree. I'll say this slowly because I had to read this twice myself, so it may go. If this goes over your head, if it registers quickly, then you're much better than I, because I had to reread this a couple of times. There's no life in the bark. There's no life in the bark of a tree. It's dead wood. But it protects the life of the tree within. And the tree grows and grows and grows and grows and grows. But if you take the bark off, it's prone to disease, dehydration, death. The church might be dead at times as it appears, but it protects. It protects what is alive within. And your impact? I came across this from a lady by the name of Betty Reese. I'm not exactly sure who she is, but I loved this little phrase. Because sometimes we say, well, who am I to have an impact on the church? I'm just one person. What can I possibly do to help the church? If you think you're too small, according to Betty Reese, if you think you're too small to be effective, you've never been in bed with a mosquito. Think about that. One little mosquito. As I shared with the youngsters that came up a little bit ago, one of my heroes of the faith that I've looked up to most of my life when I began to read a number of stories about him was Abraham Lincoln. But he's not the only one, of course. Within the Bible itself, within the Scriptures itself, I find story after story after story of people who endured, people who had patience, people who had hope. Such as Adam and Eve, who disobeyed the very first rule, but God didn't give up on him. Moses, who hid and shook with fear, tried to run, but God didn't give up on him. David, who plotted against Uriah, but God didn't give up on him. The Jewish people who became exiles, but God has never given up on them. John the Baptist, who was beheaded, but God didn't give up on him. Peter, who denied, but God never gave up on him. It is not always easy to maintain hope in the face of the situations that we face. But no matter what they are, no matter where we find ourselves, God is with us. God is there with you. Never forget that. And if it's not just God, it's your sisters and brothers. I don't know how many of you came up here as I knelt, but I know all of you were praying for me, and more. And it's not just me, it's you. When you are absent from this gathering of people, when you are absent from this fellowship,